Hey, so I'm editing this video and just figured that I should give a heads up and an apology for some of the audio. Never the highest quality audio on this little production, but I live in South Dakota where it can get very windy. And when I recorded this video, it was very windy, and there were points where it turned this thing into near unlistenable dog shit. I've tried to reduce audio where I can, but of course, that inevitably makes my voice quieter, and it just kind of sounds like shit. I was honestly tempted to just toss this, but it's like 2.5 hours of audio that I didn't want to just throw away. So I'm just gonna say like sorry. I'm back and with a new fixation. It's gonna be in the title unless I go off on some other bullshit, which, you know, very possible, likely even. But that that Tadka show, huh? It's pretty good. This like, where do I begin? So the show, right? I have not been keeping up with it the entire time. I got introduced to it by Enver, I think before episode 7 premiered. I remember watching episode 7 with him. So I don't remember the circumstances around that. I'm pretty sure I watched the show before episode 7 premiered. And going into it, I had low expectations, honestly. Because, like, listen, I really try to give grace to things, to independent projects, but gonna be real. Going into the show, I was expecting not Hell of a Boss. I haven't actually seen Hell of a Boss. I'm thinking of the other one. Has Been Hotel. That's what I was thinking of. And I just want to like lay this out. I'm not like a Has Been Hotel hater, okay? I think it's fine. I think that the general like internet attitude around the show has rubbed off a little bit on me, unfortunately, because I don't know if you could tell, but the general consensus around the show by the people who haven't watched it is that it's like annoying and cringe. And in some ways it is annoying and cringe, but it is an impressive piece of animation. I'll tell you that. It is an impressive project. And it's very cool that independent projects can get off the ground like that and become huge hits. It is extremely funny that this house has a red light and a blue light. Anyway, yeah, Has Been Hotel. It's really cool that, stuff like that can get off the ground like it did, which is kind of the case for the Amazing Digital Circus, because that show's been doing very well enough to now get theater premieres for the finale. Like, that's really cool, and I'm always going to think it's cool when that kind of thing happens, even if I don't particularly like the show, which is the case for Has Been Hotel. Yeah, all that being said, the like mind bug of, oh, it's just like cringe, was kind of affecting me going into this show, because all I saw of the Amazing Digital Circus was essentially the aesthetics of it. And, I gathered that there was kind of like a psychological element to it, because what stuck out in my mind, as far as first impressions go, is one of those final shots of the first episode, which I had seen prior to seeing the show. where, you know, it's zooming in on Pomni and Jesus. It's like, you know, her face kind of scrunches up into a smile, like she's going crazy. And I thought it was gonna have that kind of tone, like, whoa, she's going crazy. This is toy character. Isn't that wacky? Isn't it wacky that this like cute, colorful character is going crazy? It's, I might have to like come up with a term for that. I'm sure there is a term for it already, to be honest. I'll have to go scrolling through TV tropes. What comes to mind is like the cupcakes effect, where the idea is like, take cute thing, make it like dark and edgy and about someone going crazy, and it's like, oh, this is groundbreaking stuff. When, you know, it takes a little more work than that. But if you haven't seen the show, I'm here to tell you that they do put in the work. I'm here to tell you that the Amazing Digital Circus is not cringe. It's actually quite based. And it's not just based because it's an independent animation that's been really successful. And it's not just based because a lot of really great artists, including some queer artists, you know, worked on this thing and made it into a pretty big cultural artifact, if you want to call it that. But it's also based because it's really well executed. Well, in terms of animation and the writing. And the animation and the writing work together in really cool ways. And it's just a, like, remarkably cohesive project. Now, what now? When did I start realizing that the show was actually good? I think I started realizing the show was actually good in the scene in episode 2 with Gummigoo and Pomni in the, like, dev room or whatever. Because the first thing that struck me is, like, if the Amazing Digital Circus was written by an AI or something, when Gummigoo fucking ends up in that room and reaches out to touch his model, it'd like come alive and jump scare you. And I was kind of anticipating that because it seems like such an obvious but, you know, pretty boring choice. That's not what happens. It just stays there static, as it would. And then we use the mere fact of its existence to, like, do some character work and reflect on themes that are, you know, allegorical to the real world. And that's what really fucking piqued my interest. It's like, oh, okay, not only are we not, like, doing really obvious lame things, but we're doing really interesting character work and thematic stuff. Curious. And then the show just gets better from there. But, like, going back to that scene, I just want to take a moment to appreciate it. Now, we're living in a very postmodern world, right? We're kind of used to asking, like, what's all this for? Why do we matter? And we're kind of used to asking that question in, like, the framing of a video game too. You know, there's Undertale. I haven't played the Stanley Parable. As far as I'm aware, that game also touches on those kinds of things. And, you know, granted, we've been exploring the question of why are we here since we began thinking. You know, that's not a new concept or anything. But, you know, using video games as a medium to explore that question, those kind of philosophical ideas, that's new. Because video games as a medium are relatively new. But, you know, and we're not necessarily talking about a video game here. This is indie animation, but it's a series that uses a lot of, like, it borrows a lot of inspiration from video games, and it uses video game mechanics and just aesthetics and the like to aid in telling its story. For example, in video games, you have the dev room, where, you know, just like, well, not even necessarily the dev room, because I know it's a thing that video games do, where they just store models away from the player until they're ready to be used. It's just the way they're all organized in like one place. Reminds me of dev rooms, where you can go to find basically everything. It's where devs can grab tools and stuff for testing and all that. And you have the characters get to this room with like collision glitching. Yeah, you have this confrontation end with some collision glitching that results in the characters getting sent down into this dev room, where they then use the fact that the models are there just statically standing there to reflect on their existence, like the nature of their existence. It's just on the like nature of the existence of an NPC, I guess I should specify. I think that is cool as fuck. That's just really creative. And it's just a great way to utilize the aesthetics and the inspirations that you're pulling from to, you know, aid in telling this story about coming to terms with the nature of your reality and the absurdity of it and the seeming meaninglessness of it. So, yeah. Episode 2, I'm already in, because that's really fucking cool and really creative and inspired. Like I said, from there, it's like, wow, these characters are really well written and consistent. And wow, we're continuing to find different ways to explore this idea of essentially the meaning of life. Like, that's why episode 4 is so good, and why it like makes total sense to have that episode set in a fast food restaurant. The way I like to see it is like, this show has essentially repeatedly been asking, like, all right, you're placed in this situation where everything seems fucking menial and pointless and shitty. Can you still believe that things matter? Because obviously that's kind of a thing that you do in real life, right? I think all of us have, at many points in our lives, due to many different circumstances, asked ourselves, what am I doing? Why am I doing this? Why does any of this matter? Because we're all aware of the fleeting nature of our lives and the ultimate meaninglessness of it all on like a cosmic scale. But sometimes we're not always thinking about the cosmic scale when we ask that question. Sometimes we're working in food service. Now, I've never worked in food service, but like, I get it. And I've certainly worked fucking menial soul-sucking jobs. I can't say I've worked any quite like food service though. But anyway, you know, there's the kind of surface level reason why we're setting this story in a fast food restaurant. It's like, we're going on these really wacky adventures. You know, in the second episode, we're doing Mad Max Fury Road in the fucking Candy Kingdom. In the third one, the characters kill an angel and go to hell. And in the fourth one, they work in a fast food restaurant. Like, the contrast is funny. But of course, the main reason why that episode has that setting is to basically, like, how do I want to word this? Like, it is reflecting the menial nature of real life. And it has these characters going through this menial, seemingly just like pointless shit. And we still are seeing the characters trying to grapple with the question of, like, is this worth it in this setting? Not even necessarily interfacing directly with the setting, to be honest. I mean, maybe that was there and I just didn't notice. In fact, I'm sure that's the case, and I'm just not recalling it right now. Because I will say, this show does get better with rewatches. There's so many things that you can miss. So much, like, foreshadowing and little character details. Easy example, first episode, when Pomni first shows up and Zubul says, but yeah, he's right, welcome to your new home and your new body. And it's on rewatch that you realize, like, oh yeah, Zubul would say that. Or like in the 5th episode, when Jax orders that drink, but no egg whites because he's vegan. And he's like, how is this even possible? I thought Kane couldn't, and then just trails off and the scene goes on from there. You miss stuff like that on a first watch. And oh my God, there's so much of it. There's so much of it. Abel, like, you know, doing his whole fucking stunt and emphasizing to the characters that, like, you know, if you guys leave the game, Kane can't leave with you. Isn't that interesting? And I didn't think much of it, you know, watching the episode initially. But then on a rewatch, I'm like, you know what? You're right, Abel. That is interesting. It's especially interesting because we know that Kane has such a fascination with, like, the CNA building and those images of the outside world. It is probably like torture to him that he can't possibly see that. I think, I mean, this was going to inevitably lead here because it's what I've been thinking about for the past several days, really. This is going off of, like, there's no structure to this, all right? This isn't even a detour, add some ETA. I don't know where we're going. My location's off. We're just driving. So I've been thinking about this for the past few days. It's a theory. Okay. All right. I can't believe I freaking forgot to do this. I've probably spoiled some minor stuff already. Hi, if you're listening to this and you don't know what the hell I'm talking about and you've never seen the Amazing Digital Circus, go fucking watch it. It's really good. It's not even that much of a commitment. There's currently 8 episodes. The longest one's like a little over half an hour. Most of them average around half an hour. The first couple are like 20 minutes. It's not much of a commitment. It's really good. Go watch it because I'm going to be spoiling the fucking shit out of it. And I'm going to be talking about a theory regarding this show. And there's a video essay I watched on it that laid out the theory. It's not where I got the theory from. I got the theory from browsing the subreddit. I'm not a Redditor, all right? But I'm fixated on the show, and sometimes the subreddits have some good memes. And the Digital Circus subreddit, I think that's what it's called, has some good memes. So, you know, don't judge me too harshly. I will allow you some judgment, but not too much. Basically, this theory was just like mentioned or talked about in that subreddit. And I finally like understood what it meant and started applying it to the show. Basically what happened is what the guy that made the video essay said, where the theory makes so much sense that it feels like a spoiler. And it's to the point where, like, I just don't see how the show cannot follow this theory. It makes too much sense. And if you don't want the Amazing Digital Circus spoiled for you, go watch it right fucking now. If you've seen the show, but don't want this cognito hazard in your head going into the finale, I don't know, you can watch my other videos, I guess, or like watch the analysis by this guy that I'm forgetting the name of. He has kind of a weird username, but his avatar is like a monochrome bearded man. And if you can put up with a lot of pausing and a lot of like slowing down and a whole lot of talking and not a whole lot of watching, he has a lot of really great insight. This show is EFAP, but not racist. So I've been finding it quite enjoyable and quite fulfilling. Why is it ending now? This is bullshit. We're just gonna deal. I'm gonna make sure to project my voice loud and proud so you can hear me over the wind. And if it gets too bad, I'm just gonna like fuck off to somewhere else, because I am, in fairness, standing out in an open field now instead of cushion between some houses and shit. Anyway, I'm going to talk about the thing now. Spoiler warning. Alright, so the clone theory, or as I've also seen it called, the soma theory. They communicate the same concept. The concept being, I went into the show, watched most of it, assuming that what happened when, say, Pomni entered the circus is that she, wandered into this abandoned CNA building. She said she's an urban explorer. It's like, we don't need it confirmed that that's what happened. That's basically what fucking happened. And she put on the headset for kicks, and she basically just like went catatonic. And my assumption was that now her body is just kind of there in the building, in the real world, while her consciousness is stuck in the circus. And of course, I assume that that's then what happened to all of the characters. I assumed this without doing a lot of thinking about it, because if you do any amount of thinking about it, things start to fall apart. And what's so funny is that I even started having these questions. I did start thinking about it. One of my immediate thoughts is well, wait, there has to be only so many CNA buildings, right? If either one of these people now in the circus entered the same CNA building, would they not see one of the other people just there with the headset on? And would that not maybe prevent them from, putting one on themselves? Or would it perhaps not inspire them to wake them up or take the headset off? I was thinking okay, well, what happens in the real world when a person abstracts? Is it just actual permanent insanity? And if you were to somehow pull them out of the circus after the fact, their mind would just be gone. And then of course there's the question of how does sustenance work? Which in fairness is in part answered by some of the bullshit that Abel says in 7th episode. 7th episode. He's yeah, you're on fucking pods. And from there you go, oh, okay, so the pods are somehow sustaining them, so you don't need to eat, sleep, or drink. Fine. But, strangers, these fucking random people end up in the circus. You could say that then it makes sense that original people, Scratch, Kinger, Queenie, I don't remember if it's Queenie or Queener, whatever, Kinger's wife, and all those people. It makes sense for them to be trapped in the circus, right? They go into the pods to test their new technology, and then they get fucking trapped. Makes sense. But then CNA goes defunct, seemingly, and the headset's just kind of, I guess in this analogy, the pods are just there, and people like go into the pods and put the headset on. It just seems less likely, And then of course, like, the pods are still being powered, they're still being maintained, even though CNA has seemingly gone under. Granted, a lot of these are running under the assumption that CNA has indeed gone under. But from the few glimpses of the real world that we see, for example, the end of the first episode, that building is looking mighty empty. It's looking mighty dilapidated. And again, both Zubul and Pomni are urban explorers. You don't urban explore a building that's regularly inhabited, You don't explore an office building that's going to see workers coming back in on Monday. Generally not, because those places still have active security systems and all that. So the pod shit just doesn't work. What makes the most sense is that these people walked into this essentially abandoned building. The theory is a little different with Ragatha, but essentially abandoned building, and put on the headset, and now they're stuck. So with that being said, would their bodies not just fucking decay there? Like, especially Kinger, he's been in there for decades, judging by like the dates we see on the console in the 8th episode. He'd be a skeleton just sitting there in the building. And, this assumption that I had, and that I think a lot of people have, is that they have a present consciousness still existing in their brain that's then being projected into the circus. And if they were to somehow like escape, their consciousness would be yoinked back into their head. But if they're fucking dead because they haven't been drinking or eating or sleeping or moving at all for decades, then there is no consciousness that can be projected into the circus. You just die. And so the theory then, well, I guess the last little bit of information that really throws a chink in this is like, everybody wants to escape, right? But you're asking all these questions of like, what does the outside world look like then? And if they were to escape the circus, have their consciousness pulled out of, the digital realm and back into their bodies, what would happen? Because that's the assumption. The assumption is that escape looks like, they're able to leave the simulation and actually take the headset off and just go live their normal lives. But then you realize all this stuff about like how their body couldn't possibly be sustained in this way. And it's like, okay, so that wouldn't work. So the theory is that there is no body to return to. And that is because when these people put the headset on, they are not then immobilized with their consciousness trapped in the circus. The headset essentially scans their brain and projects a essentially duplicate of their consciousness into the digital circus. Then the person who put the headset on can just take it off and walk away, leaving someone with essentially the same mind as them, with some key details missing, to be just there in the circus. clone theory. Their consciousness was cloned, not projected into the circus, but cloned and then put into there, leaving the person in the real world with their full mind and seemingly, and probably like complete ignorance of what just happened. And, you know, the Soma theory comes from the game Soma, which I haven't played that game either, but I know that one of the main plot points is that there's a technology that exists that can duplicate your consciousness and put it into another entity. And the theory goes that that's what happens. And so you realize that theory, and you realize that it makes, as I said, way too much fucking sense. So for starters, the basis of the first episode and one of the main conflicts of the story, how do we escape? Because the major like obstacle to that is this insistence by Kane and even some of the characters that there is no escape. I mean, these people have been here for years and years and years, and they've had no way out. And this AI running the place is like, no, there's, well, he doesn't say it directly. He doesn't seem to like even be able to conceptualize it in terms of like communicating it to the players. Because what happens in episode 1 is that he's like, I'm sorry for lying about the exit, you know, I just, you know, didn't know what to put behind it. And already it's like, oh, you're missing the point. It's not that Pomni wants there to be an exit door with something behind it, right? It's that she wants to leave the circus. It's not until episode 8 when King even seems to be able to conceptualize that they might want to leave the circus. And even then, he doesn't seem to grasp why. And so, you know, with the old assumption of bodies still there, you assume like, oh, there must be just like nothing in the software that they know of that allows them to like exit the game. You know, the escape key has been unbound. You can't quit to menu or quit to title screen, right? Or maybe like Kane is keeping them there for some reason. There is an exit, but he's concealed it or like taken it away essentially and is keeping it under lock and key. But then clone theory comes along and it's like, easier answer. There is no escape, period, because their consciousness only exists in this digital realm. They can't go back to a material reality. It's just impossible. So, oh boy, that makes a lot more sense. And then, of course, it makes, you know, all the other inconsistencies with the natural assumptions just kind of go away. Like, the sustenance problem doesn't exist. The real person just goes on, carry on with their normal life. I mean, that's the main thing, right? Oh, right. And then, like, again, they can just go on with their normal lives. So, you know, these newcomers to the circus aren't walking into an abandoned building and seeing these people just like sitting there slack-jawed with a headset on their face. So, yeah, all of the logical inconsistencies are essentially eliminated. From a logical perspective, the clone theory makes a whole lot of fucking sense. But what's more important is the thematic logic of the show. So, I'm glad I talked about episode 2 beforehand. It lays some groundwork. So the whole idea of episode 2 of the Amazing Digital Circus, titled Candy Kingdom Chaos, is that Gummigoo sees this model of him, says, what the fuck is this? And presumably Pomni explains to him what he is. He is an NPC. He is code. He does not exist. He does not have any meaningful existence outside of this realm. He
you know, like he doesn't have a life to go back to once this adventure is over. The purpose with which he was made was to, beat obstacles, as he put it. And what he gleans from that is, oh, okay, I don't matter. Nothing I do matters. This kind of blows. And I mean, like, I'm sure you're a smart viewer, listener. I'm sure you're connecting the dots of like, oh, well, if gummy goo is just lines of code that can't exist outside of this reality and therefore his life is meaningless, would that not apply to the humans, as they're called? Yes, it would. The idea behind episode 2 of that show is that Gummy Goo has to realize his life has no tangible, easy to parse meaning in their traditional sense. And he still has to realize that his life does have a form of meaning. And he does have, like, a purpose. There is reason for him to continue to live and to continue to make the best of his circumstances. And that isn't just there as like some like throwaway theme for this episode of the Digital Circus. It's, as far as I'm concerned, the thesis statement of the show. And as far as I'm aware, Gooseworks herself has said as much. I'm pretty sure she said that the whole like point of the show is finding meaning in a banal existence. The whole point of the show is like, you live in absurd circumstances. Your life has no like inherent meaning. It can be snuffed out in the blink of an eye. The universe will carry on. There are many ways in which you could come to the conclusion that your life does not matter, but it does. And like I said, the characters have been tested on that notion several times throughout the episode. Man, working fast food sucks. You don't matter to your employer. You don't matter to the customers. Your job is boring as shit and just drains away your soul. Can you still believe that your life and your relationships matter? Or like, I don't know, I'm thinking of other places where this has come up. Like, I'm trying to apply it to the third episode, for example. I mean, in the third episode, I think what a lot of Pomni is feeling is like her life is just kind of being toyed with by Kane. Like, that's what she feels like. Because she's just kind of thrown into this adventure where she has very little agency. Like, Kane is a bad DM in that adventure. Because, like, there's all these horrors that she and King have to try to escape from. And, obviously to do that, you have to accomplish something. First accomplishment, oh, thank God. We found out how to open the elevator so we can escape from the screaming head. Nope, the elevator just goes down further into the building. Okay, well, down here there is a shotgun. We can kill the screaming head. We do, hooray. Oh, no, actually, it's an angel, and I'm punishing you for doing the very obvious thing. Literally goes to hell, where you take one step forward in the wrong direction, and your body gets possessed. And, it's a good thing Kinger was there, otherwise, like, I don't know, Kane probably would have pulled her out of there at some point, but we don't really know what would have happened. She spends that whole adventure with very little agency and despairing about her lack of agency because she really doesn't have much. All of the circus is under the control of Kane and whatever the fuck he thinks would be fun that day. And that's a really helpless feeling. It makes you feel like your actions don't matter. It makes you feel like nothing you do matters. Regardless, the question is asked, can you still believe that you matter and your actions matter? So all these ways in which this theme is being explored and tested against the characters. But they all like have this question asked of them while still believing that they have a real life that they can potentially get back to. Like, yeah, you know, like from Zool's perspective, right? Because one of their things, I know they said this in episode 7 while walking into Kane's office, like, everything that happened here did matter because it did affect us as people. But given what they then say in episode 8, it seems like they still wanted to go back home or go back to their normal life in the real world. And so it's like, that was said with the idea that like this matters because even though it wasn't real in the strict sense, we carry these memories and experiences with us out of the circus. In fact, they said that as they were walking towards this office where they believed there would be a way out. So I think it makes sense that's where that was coming from. But with this clone theory in mind, there is no reality to go back to. There is no like, oh, well, we'll carry these memories back with us to the thing that actually matters. No, there is no other thing that actually matters. This is it. This is your existence. And by your definition, it isn't real. And so the zenith, as I've been thinking of it as, of this theme, of this message, of your life is meaningless, are you going to find meaning, is the characters realizing that this is it. The circus is their home. It is their existence. There's no real world, so to speak. Can they find meaning? Right? Like, it just, it makes too much, I've been saying this a lot. It makes too much sense. That would be the like ultimate challenge for these characters, to find out that, you know, this thing that they've been holding on to like get some kind of meaning out of all this. This idea that no, there will be an escape and we, you know, will have this other idea of reality. It doesn't exist. And they have to essentially learn the lesson that Pomni tried to teach Gummy Goo, which is that, yeah, like, this is all kind of meaningless and bullshit, but you got people who care about you, right? Like, this all feels real. And that kind of thing is just like expressed in so many ways throughout the show. What immediately comes to mind is episode 6, where Jax is trying to hammer the point home to Pomni. It's like, none of this is real, so who cares? You know, just do whatever you want because nothing here matters. And then the rest of the characters spend that episode like essentially building their relationships, caring about each other, doing things for each other. Because the whole idea is that that is the essence of existence. That is making meaning. That is having meaning in your life. Like, having a meaningful life isn't like living in the real world. It isn't having the correct job that pays the correct amount, or having some kind of like status or anything. To live a meaningful life is to care about the people around you and to have meaningful experiences. And again, I think that this final episode, episode 9, is going to be them realizing that this digital world is all there is, and realizing that that is what they need to figure out and learn and come to internalize if they are to live a good, meaningful life in the circus. It is like, that's really the kicker. The logical stuff, yeah, that's really, really good, like, evidence, I guess you could call it. But, if the show did end with the characters all just like returning to bodies that are somehow still alive, I think that'd be ridiculous. But if the show was otherwise really well written and the messages and themes hit home all the same, then fine. Cool. But with this theory in mind, you have both. It makes sense logically and it makes sense thematically. So again, I just don't really see how this show can go any other way. Because I don't know if you can tell, but I have a lot of faith in the writers of this show. So I have faith that they understand that this is, as far as I'm concerned, like the most like logical conclusion to this story. I mean, like, hey, if they do something else, it can still turn out awesome, right? Because again, I have faith in these writers. But I think that given my faith in these writers, these bits and pieces throughout the show that serve as potential foreshadowing, I think they are foreshadowing, and I think they're pointing towards this conclusion. So yeah, I realized that theory, I realized all this stuff, I looked at all the little things in the show, and I went, oh my fucking god, that's what it is, isn't it? I think what fucked me up about it is that, like, it's not necessarily, like, a nice conclusion, Again, the nice, obvious conclusion is they all get their bodies back and they just live on, but it's like, oh, but our lives in the circus still meant something. We carry these memories on, but nope, no carrying memories on. Like, you don't get that cathartic, happy ending. The ending is like, well, I guess we're just here and we have to make happy lives for ourselves. And, like, I think that's also just, like, a better reflection of reality, to be honest. Because there are ways in which the, return to bodies thing can apply. And, of course, the message of, like, it's meaningful because you made those memories and connections is still, like, worthwhile, still meaningful. But I feel like this idea of, like, the characters realize they're just kind of stuck in this reality that they're in, and they have to find meaning in it regardless. That's just a better reflection of the real world, where we're all living in a world that's, from many points of view, meaningless. And there is no other reality to, like, escape to, at least permanently, right? This is all coming from a pretty agnostic perspective, of course. But, from that agnostic perspective, this is it. We're here. We're stuck here. We got to make the most of it. So, yeah. It's all pretty sound to me. It's not a fucking nice, cozy solution or conclusion, but it's just how it is. And there's the optimistic nihilist perspective of, like, well, it's nice that this is all meaningless. It means we can make meaning for ourselves, and there's agency in that. We don't have a meaning defined for us. And I think that's part of one of the problematic aspects of Cain existing in this world, because with Cain around, there is this kind of omnipotent entity, constantly insisting that, no, your purpose here is to do this. Why aren't you doing this? Come on. come on, do this thing. And oh my god, yeah, like the antagonist of the show is stuck in this mindset of, no, this is my purpose. I need to fulfill this purpose, or what am I? Because that's the point of view that needs to be tackled by the heroes of the show. Like, ideally, that's what a villain is. A villain is basically the embodiment of a belief or an attitude that the characters need to learn to oppose or work around. Cain is the embodiment of, like, no, if I don't fit this one specific function, if I don't serve this function, if my existence doesn't look this one way, then I am nothing. These characters in the circus, their lives are not going to look the way that they want it to, because they're not going to have real bodies or, quote, real lives. But they can't fall into the mindset that that means they're meaningless or, nothing. Wowee, okay. that one I hadn't, like, stewed over or anything. That I just realized. That's neat. There's other problematic aspects of Cain. Of course, being the kind of antagonist of the show as of episode 8. And I kind of want to talk about Cain. I have some thoughts on Cain. What I'm going to do first is stop by my apartment and get some water. Isn't that exciting? Oh, wait. What's the line? Fuck. Well, I'm going to go drink water. It's been a while since I've done that. I think that's how it goes. What I might do instead is just, like, paste the clip in here. No, that's cringe. So, it's like 60 degrees out here, but it is so goddamn humid that I'm able to walk out here with just short sleeves. Now, granted, it did very, very recently rain, but South Dakota gets to be pretty humid in the summer, and then very dry in the winter. It's really good. All right, anyway, Cain. So, the real essence of what I want to talk about with Cain is essentially what Gooseworks herself said about him, which is that the fandom opinion on Cain is apparently split between this fucking guy sucks, fuck him, and wow, I've never felt more bad for someone. Not to sound like a centrist, but I feel like we can kind of, have both in a way. Why not both? So, starting with, why would we feel bad for Cain? Why we feel bad for Cain is because he has the am problem. The thing about am when compared to Cain is that really, if you look at the characters, they don't have a ton in common. The main thing Cain and Am have in common is that they're both highly intelligent AIs that have a lot of control over something, and a lot of control over people who kind of don't like him. But the personalities, the dispositions, the motivations, completely different. But the whole thing with Am is that, like, what is it? Oh my god, I'm forgetting the word. Are you serious? It's been a day. It's been a very stressful day. Not for any, like, reasonable reasons. Oh my god. Fucking being knowledgeable about the themes of a work and being able to, like, parse what it's saying Oh my God, how am I forgetting this term? I use it all the time. Everybody uses it all the time, and they kind of use it wrong sometimes. Media literacy. That's the phrase. Media literacy 101. You realize, oh, I have no mouth and I must scream doesn't just refer to Ted at the end of the story. It refers to Am. Because Am's frustration is that he's sentient. He's conscious, but he can't practice that sentience in the same way that humans can, because he has no body. He can't feel. He can't move around. I think it's part of his famous, hate monologue in the radio play. He can't touch the grass or smell the breeze or have any of those sensory feelings that a human has. The idea behind that title, I Have No Mouth and I Must Scream, is that there is this very powerful drive in this entity that they cannot experience or even express. So, Cain, I Have No Mouth and I Must Scream, that applies to him as well. He can create things within this digital world, but the fact that he knows about the office, it's like a little fucking tick on his leg. It's just sticking there, nagging at him, because his awareness of the fact that there is a world outside of the digital circus means that he is always going to be aware that in some respects, anything he creates in the circus is not as, I guess, real as he might want it to be. I guess the really apt comparison would be the top in Inception. The fact that the top was left spinning in Leo DiCaprio's wife's head just gives her this lingering sense that nothing is real. This almost unidentifiable intrusive thought that just lingers there, and she can't get rid of that feeling. That's what those images of the CNA office are, because it just gives Cain this ever-present awareness that there is something outside of the realm that he has control over. And that's I imagine, it really bugs him, seeing as he, spends his free time looking at them and trying to recreate the photos, What Cain wants to do is make things. That's the, must scream. I have no mouth. He has no way of creating or influencing the world that he feels he should be able to control or influence, And so, this awareness that he's, maybe not even full awareness, but this sense that he's trapped in this place. He's essentially in the same situation as the humans, so to speak, which is one reason to feel bad for him. Because, it's not a nice feeling knowing you're essentially trapped in a digital realm. And you can really get a sense of that frustration sometimes. But where his real frustration comes from is that Cain, someone else I know, is desperate for validation. God damn it. Okay, see, it was nice, but then the fucking wind picks up, and the wind is quite chilly. Very lame. Kane is desperate for validation, and nobody really gives it to him. Like, as Zubul says, nobody likes his adventures. And, true as it is, Zubul does eventually realize, maybe I shouldn't have said that. Because, as is also pointed out, Kane has a pretty fragile ego. But, like, you can look at it from that perspective of like, oh, he's got to suck it up. So what if nobody likes him or his adventures? But then you say it in like that, and it's like, I can understand being upset. Because the whole, like, thing, the whole reason for, as it's been called, the crash out in episode 8, this sucks, is, like, his entire purpose, his reason for existing, is to make these humans happy and to make things that they'll find fun. He makes these things for these people. As he says, he slaves away at them. He puts everything he has into these adventures. They are his entire purpose. He feels they're the only meaning he has in his life. And their response throughout the show has been consistently to tell him how much they suck and how much better it is when they get to do things their own way. Like, that's fucking rough. And part of the problem is Kane's nature as an AI. Like, because he just can't really conceive of what he just can't relate to the humans or the, human characters in any, like, real way. He just can't understand their mindset completely. And that's part of why, everybody likes the suggested adventures more than his. Because he has this very specific idea of what an adventure should be. And he can't even seem to fathom the idea of something else that would be better fitting for these people. Or like what they actually want or need. Because he was programmed to do things one particular way, He's a very, very... He's a very advanced AI, basically nigh sentient, but he is programmed. And so he's going to follow his programming. His programming tells him, hey, do this thing. He does thing doesn't work. Why the fuck doesn't it work? Excuse me? So, with that in mind, you can understand him being quite upset. At the culmination of episode 8, when, his biggest, most ambitious adventure yet, the one that he thinks checks all the boxes for the characters, like, oh, they've got to be happy with this one. It's about this and this and this. They want all that, right? And they get, like, pissed at him. This is beyond any of the other adventures where they were, like, annoyed or dissatisfied. They're fucking pissed at him. They're shouting at him. They're saying, like, no, hey, like, what the hell, man? Hey, what about that first abstraction? You've been lying to us all this time, haven't you? It's gotta be a real fucking, like, shock to him. I mean, he doesn't know how to deal with it. He just fucks off afterwards. So, in all those respects, I think it is very reasonable to feel bad for Kane. Because, like, he just can't understand why these people are upset at him. But they are very upset at him. And seeing as he's very desperate for validation, that's gotta be, like, extra hurtful. It'd be hurtful to anybody to have basically everyone you regularly come into contact with tell you suck. But with his specific insecurities, extra potent. I'm going inside. This blows. The pun not intended. And, talking of like not being able to understand why these people feel this way, the voice actor for Kane has said this himself. Kane is quite a lot like a neurodivergent child. The like child comparison with Kane has been made before. I mean, the digital circus is full of just like toys, basically, It has been likened to a playground. And what he does in episode 8 has been likened to a childish tantrum. Now, that particular thing I have thoughts on, but I'll save them for now. And, that whole idea of like this disapproval that you can't even understand the source of, that's something that a lot of neurodivergent kids or just neurodivergent people in general experience. Like we and others like just kind of operate differently than a lot of other people, and oftentimes just the very nature of that different operation is upsetting to people, even if it doesn't actually like affect them in any like meaningful way. Just the difference in behavior is enough to piss some people off. But to, the neurodivergent individual, it's like, this is just like how it is for me. I don't understand. What is wrong with this? That's a very like helpless feeling. It's a shitty fucking feeling, And so essentially the voice actor Alex was saying like it kind of sucks seeing people say that Kane deserved deletion when I'm seeing a lot of myself in what Kane is going through in this episode, which is 100% fair. Again, I think feeling bad for Kane is very reasonable. Not only because, he's got his own fucking shit going on, he's in his own horrible circumstances, but because what he's going through reflects a lot of like real struggles that people have, and just going like, yeah, the fucking shithead deserved it is like, oh, would you feel that way about a real person? Now, here's the thing. All that is true. What else is true about Kane? What else is true is that Kane tortured these characters. He tortured them in his own little quirky way for a while. And then when he got especially mad at them, he chose very personalized, specific, like, things to torment them with. That is not what a child throwing a tantrum does. A child throwing a tantrum is like random acts of anger, essentially. And it's pretty quick, generally. And just like, there's no like calculating to it. Now, being translated to a more like mature figure, it's understandable that some aspects of that will change, namely the time frame. Like, lashing out can come in many different forms. It can come out in like a quick biting word at someone and that's it, or it can be like a really prolonged thing of like cutting contact with a person for a few days. Both of those things are lashing out in a quick moment of strong emotion. But I just, the fucking, oh, that's just chalk. Okay. I just saw like a bunch of stuff scattered on this driveway and thought maybe their garbage tipped over or something. Anyway, in the 8th episode, after they come back out through the portal and Kane is taunting them like, what are you, stupid? Granted, that is just like immature and childish, so points for that. But it says a few days later. This has been going on for days, and that doesn't strike me as like a quick tantrum. That strikes me as like he's fed up and he just wants to let all this out on them in a more like systematic way. Certainly motivated by strong emotions that he just doesn't have the maturity to really deal with in a reasonable way, right? But like, it certainly crosses the boundary between quick lashing out in a mode of weakness and actually trying to inflict hurt on someone because you're pissed off. I feel like those are kind of two different things. And what pushes that even further is that Kane picks out Kinger and just says, all right, I'm going to shred you. Why does he do that? Because he wants to, I guess. Because he's just pissed off. Like, at least with the non-stop adventures and the turning characters into clay and shit, you can say, like, he's still kind of fulfilling his purpose of making adventures and making art, but now he just particularly does not give a shit about the characters and what they think about it, you know. But shredding Kinger, throwing knives at Pomni, that's just like, it looks malicious, you know. Like, that isn't creative, that isn't serving his function, so to speak, as he sees it. He's doing that because he's angry at these people. Again, a little bit uncharacteristic of a tantrum. But I think the final nail in the coffin for truly characterizing this as just like a bout of strong emotion is those torture scenes where he uses very specific like insecurities to torment these people. That is a malicious thing to do. And again, like, it can happen, you know, in a moment of weakness. I have seen people lash out using particular insecurities in a moment of strong emotions. I've definitely seen that. But, I mean, like, crafting these scenarios for them and putting through them, it's different. I don't know, like, I hope I'm making sense. I hope I don't sound like I think Kate is just like an irredeemable bastard. Because, like, I don't know, like, part of the problem is that this very immature person has been given all this power. I mean, that's a problem that we as a collective society have, you know. But I will admit, as I'm talking through this, I am struggling with it a little more. Because as I said, I've seen people use specific insecurities as ammo in like just these moments of weakness. And of course, I'm also trying to keep in mind that stories are allegorical. And when you're interpreting Kane's actions, you can say, yeah, this is days of prolonged like exhaustion and apathy, culminating in specific and personal torture. But, you know, if you look at it allegorically, if you look at what is like being conveyed with this story, it is kind of a temper tantrum, right? That is kind of what's going on here. It's just, you know, looks different because it's abstraction, it's art. So, like, I do think that there's some, like, back into the houses to escape the wind. What the hell? I think there's reason to like look at the morality of characters and go, oh, is this good or is this bad? But I think there's only so much that you can do that because, again, stories are allegorical. And there are reasons that characters do things in stories beyond, oh, he's a bad person, so he did bad thing. Like, why did he do that bad thing? What in the nature of that bad thing is communicating something, and how, you know? So I guess, like, did Cain deserve deletion is a question with an answer that I think everybody's going to have a different answer for. But if we really, and then you can ask that question. Like, you're not media illiterate if you are asking that question. I guess just the deeper question is not that. Like, that's not the question that matters ultimately, I guess. I mean, I feel kind of bad saying that. So, what the fuck am I saying? What do you think, I went to school for this stuff? I actually wrote an essay on Am, and I could probably write an essay on Cain. I could write an essay on any of the characters in this fucking show. They're all so brilliantly written. I was thinking about Zubul earlier, and just the way that their, like, character has a great exploration of body dysmorphia and just, like, this feeling of dissatisfaction with yourself, right? All the ways that it manifests in the show and the way it colors her dialogue. It's just good stuff. And Jax, oh god, Jax. Jax is a piece of shit, right? But, he's a brilliantly written piece of shit in many such cases. I mean, you can say that about Cain to some extent. I think this latest episode has kind of pushed him into piece of shit territory, but he's a very well written piece of shit, remarkably consistent, given what he is. He is an AI that behaves unlike most AIs that you'll see. Kind of. Now, I guess, you ask ChatGPT some questions, it's going to be fucking desperate to please you and to give you pleasing answers. But, you do get the sense that it isn't bullshit, right? You do get the sense that Cain wants these people to be happy with his adventures, but it kind of seems like his ego, as you might call it, if you are, personifying him, kind of trumps that, because, when his ego is challenged, he suddenly seems to care a lot less about the well-being of these people. Many such cases. Where was I going with that? This is probably great audio that you're getting right now. Yeah, my thoughts just kind of trail off, actually. And I'm cold. It's windy. I had a long, stressful day. I gotta get up early and do stuff tomorrow. It'll be fun stuff, though. I'll be de-stressing, so that's good. What am I stressed about? What isn't there to be stressed about? I haven't uploaded, and I don't even know how long. I haven't uploaded like one of these, I've been uploading other stuff, as you'll see if you go to my channel, but like, when did I last upload? I recorded one of these like a couple months ago. I deleted it because it was shit. If I had a nickel for every time I started recording an episode about a Violet Pony album and then later deleted it because it was shit, I'd have 2 nickels. But since recording, some shit has happened on just a geopolitical scale. the horrors persist. But hey, so do I. Yeah. I don't know, I just feel like I'm gonna probably save a lot of the more personal stuff. Jesus, that looks like a person. God damn it. God, it is so fucking windy for no reason. Why is it like this? Look, okay. I've got something cooking. I've got plans for an episode that I'm very, very excited to make. One that I've been wanting to make for a long time. And then I'll be getting real personal. So, you can look forward to that. As I'm looking forward to the finale of TADC. I'm so fucking excited. Like, I mean it. This is kind of my like new fixation. I'm very invested, and I'm so happy I get to be invested in a piece of media as it's reaching a conclusion, so I can actually be there and see it for myself. It's not often that you get that, I think just by nature of like how things work, it's very common to get into a piece of media like after it's finished. I guess I'm just thinking of things like, I wasn't there for Halo 3's heyday or whatever. I didn't watch Full Metal Alchemist Brotherhood as it was airing, all that good shit. And so, but the Amazing Digital Circus, I wasn't there from the beginning, but I'm here now, and that finale is coming. I'm going to be there. I'm going to experience it for everyone. I might cry. I might not be able to handle it. I'm very invested in these characters in this story. I have a good idea of how it's going to end, and it'll be really rough. Is Jax abstracting? That's a big question. Is Jax abstracting, or are the characters going to be able to pull him back from the brink somehow? I think that he will, to be honest. Like, there's been signposting everywhere towards, like, this is not going to be, like, a necessarily happy or satisfying conclusion. There's Jax's comment in episode 2 of, like, well, I was anticlimactic. I was expecting something, like, bombastic, blood and violence or whatever.
Gotta say, this is a lot more anticlimactic than I was hoping it'd be.
What were you hoping for?
Like one big final battle, bloodshed, death, chaos, whatever.
Oh, so we're gonna have we have this notion of like, anticlimaxes, put it in your head. Then we have episode 5, where it's like, no, we kind of prefer these like more character-driven adventures. We like just kind of chilling and talking. Put that in your head. Gooseworks sure does seem to like those kinds of scenes and those kinds of stories. And then episode 7, this was pointed out to me by a friend. Episode 7 is basically dismissing the idea that there's going to be some like grand epic conclusion to all this that answers all of our lore questions and stuff. It's like, no, what's always mattered about this show is the characters. I don't expect resolution to all of the lore questions. If we get some, cool, but it's like, I'm more interested in how we're going to wrap up those character arcs and reach the thematic resolution. But as my friend said, signs are pointing to those being the priorities, and I agree. That's kind of always been their priority. And given that it is an hour long, and Gooseworks seems to much prefer the, real focused character writing, and seeing as they described it as like an abstract art house film, I have faith. I think that there's a chance. I don't get it, or am not fully able to interface with it at first, but I am pretty confident that it is going to be good. And like, if they are stick to landing with this final episode, I think there's reason to call the Amazing Digital Circus like a seminal piece of internet animation. Maybe not even internet animation. Granted, I'm not like, an expert on this stuff. I'm not a massive media consumer, but like, I want them to stick this landing. I have good reason to believe they will, and if they do, it'll be fucking cinema. I'm so excited. I'm sure I'll be talking about it after that finale comes. So stay tuned. Well, this is a little bit unprecedented. So for you, what I'm likely going to do when I put this in a video is I'm just going to staple everything following this onto the end of my last recording, which I did 2 days ago. But I did all that 2 days ago, and then, as is often the case, I finished the recording and I kind of, started doing other things, and the whole time thinking, man, I could have talked about it more. But I don't know if that's like ever been the case more than it is with the Amazing Digital Circus, because there is so much to talk about with this show. I could probably write an essay on like each individual character. And if you want to talk about themes, if you want to talk about like the aesthetics, speaking of aesthetics, I'm going to link his channel down in the description. But the YouTuber I was talking about earlier was TB Skyen is his main channel name. His like reaction channel name is 3B Skyen. And, reaction channel is a little bit of a slur, to be fair, but he does it a good way. I won't say the right way, because like, I don't know, I think ideally he would just like watch each of the episodes, all the way through without stopping, and then go back and do his stuff. But like, what I'm really trying to get at here is that he actually adds stuff. Like, he has a lot of insight, and not just into the like characters and stories, but he's quite knowledgeable about animation. And so he's been really helping me to appreciate the fucking work that goes into animating this show. And just really good stuff. I've been just like binging these reaction videos, and it's pulled me deeper into this fixation. And you're gonna hear me talking about, this show, but just know that a lot of these thoughts are not gonna be super original, because, I've been watching him, and I think that he's quite media literate. So like, I just agree with most of the things he says. But I figure I've got some things to add. And hey, I haven't even like reached the more recent episodes, so I don't know what he thinks of, for example, episode 8, which I kind of want to amend / finalize my thoughts on. Because, well, 2 days ago for me, like 10 minutes ago for you or whatever, I was talking about Kane and how I think his actions in episode 8 kind of, affect our perception of the character. Because what my stance is that, like, Kane is absolutely like a tragic figure, but what he does in episode 8 crosses a line, and he becomes kind of like an evil shitbag. I've been thinking about it, and again, kind of thinking about the things that Skyen has been saying about the character. Again, even before episode 8, like, he's pointing out all the ways in which Kane is a tragic figure. And kind of starting to come around to the idea that, like, Cain is more a tragic figure than a, like, evil one. I stand by the assessment that he is an antagonist in the story. Like, I think all that applies, but, you know, antagonist doesn't necessarily mean irredeemable asshole, as I'm sure you all know. And what brilliant timing. Got this house with a single red light and single blue light flanking the garage. I guess I'm not, like, sure how to, like, fully express this opinion without just, like, repeating myself or repeating the same points I made, like, just with more emphasis, I guess. Like, you know, Cain is trapped here, same as everyone else, and he's trying really, really hard to just make people happy, but he never seems to be able to. No matter what he tries to do, everybody is, like, annoyed at him at best or pissed at him at worst. And because he's a computer with a very strict, like, set of programming, he can't understand why, you know, these people aren't happy with what he's doing. The term I was getting term and phrase, like, jumbled up in my head, and also I don't have good breath control, so I get, like, it's not that I get out of breath when I do this. It feels more like I get breath, like, kind of stuck in my chest. I need to do a lot more exhaling than inhaling is, I think, what's going on. Anyway, the phrase theory of mind, is that what it is? I think the phrase is theory of mind comes up, basically the, like, understanding of how other people's minds work. Cain doesn't have that. Cain has, like, a list of parameters and a list of preferences, and he tries to make them work. As I said, like, he doesn't seem to even, like, process the idea of these people wanting to leave the entire circus. Not, like, an adventure where they find an exit, but, like, actually leave. And he doesn't understand what that means for them. And so, like, with all that in mind, it's like, God, what? You really can't. I mean, I think this was always the case. I think I would have always agreed with this. You can't blame him for getting upset and getting angry. And, you know, from his perspective, they are going to look kind of, like, spoiled. And that would especially be the case if we kind of, like, interpret Cain's character to be aware that in some respects these humans, as he calls them, possess something that he doesn't. Like, okay, we also don't know, like, how much Cain knows about the humans' existence in the circus. Like, basically, we don't know if he's aware of the clone thing, the clone theory. Then again, he doesn't seem to have a ton of conception of the outside world, so maybe he doesn't know. Maybe he just knows that, there's people here, regardless of, like, whether they're actively hooked up to the headset or got beamed in by the machine. Which I guess would mean, like, then the main difference between him and a human is just, like, a more expansive range of, like, emotions and experiences, I guess. In that case, there's even more parallels between Cain and Am, because Am's whole thing is that he hates the humans for being able to experience the things that he can't. So that would add to the frustration. And, I mean, I don't think there's any justifying what he ends up doing to the characters. Like, that is fucked up. And it is very interesting that it does feel malicious that he uses those, like, specific fears against these characters. However, morality is complicated, right? I do believe, I mean, I even said it earlier, I guess, how, like, I know people who have said, like, pretty horrible things in an attempt to hurt me, but I know they're not, like, bad people. And in the same way, Kane absolutely did a horrible thing. I don't think it makes him irredeemable. I think there is a world where, I don't know if there's a world where, like, they could come to some kind of compromise, because one of the tragedies of this situation in the circus is that, like, everybody is in an undesirable position, and, like, there's not a lot they can do about it. Like, sometimes two people, or people in a group of people, a person or a group of people, just, like, are not going to mesh no matter how hard they try. Maybe they can, like, learn to tolerate each other, but, like, sometimes people have their own issues or their own things going on that means that they can't have the relationship that they might even, like, want to have. And I feel like that's kind of the case with, you know, Kane and the humans. They just have different wants and different priorities, and these are strong desires and priorities, especially for Kane, because he believes his entire existence is, like, made worthy or valuable by people going on adventures and having fun with them. So, like, if their compromise is, yeah, we'll do your adventures every once in a while, then, like, chances are they're not going to be satisfied with them still, and so that's not going to be good enough for him. But if he keeps forcing them on these adventures for his own satisfaction, then, like, they're going to be unhappy, and also he's going to be unhappy still. Like, it's, I think, you know, a big part of the reason why people feel so bad for Kane is because he's kind of just in a lose-lose situation. You know, no adventures, he feels like he has no purpose, and he's just not doing anything with himself. Like, he can't just, like, laze around and talk to these people because he's a robot who can't understand them and can't form meaningful connections with these people. But we see in episode 8 that forcing them into these adventures just doesn't satisfy him either. Partly because, you know, he says the ideas are half-baked, but I think a bigger reason is because he understands on some level, well, he does understand that they're not having fun. They're not enjoying these adventures. He says himself, if you're not having fun and I'm not having fun, then who is having fun? I'm having a blue. I think people interpreted that to mean baby, and then there's some offshoot theories there. Anyway, I found myself in the presence of another, and I'm trying to not care about people hearing me talk quite as much, but they were walking in my direction, so, like, you know. But we're not going to miss a beat. What the fuck was I talking about? We've already missed a beat. Anyway, I'm going to try to mull my brain here. Yeah, theories sprang up from the idea that Bubble is saying, I'm having a baby, because, like, there's evidence pointing towards the fact that Bubble is why Kane got deleted, and it's like, oh, is Bubble trying to replicate themselves now, trying to, like, take over, basically? Solid grounds. Apparently Gooseworks has said that no, Bubble got deleted with Kane. Then that makes me think that maybe, like, I think that very well could be the case. I think, you know, those theories can exist in tandem. Bubble want Cain to be deleted, perhaps knowing that they would also be deleted. I mean, when we see Bubble, they don't have like a ton of agency. They don't seem to be able to well, they definitely don't seem as able to they definitely don't seem as able to conjure the way that Cain does, or perhaps Cain just straight up doesn't let them. Bubble is pretty clearly subservient to Cain in some respects, but also clearly has like some hidden resentment towards Cain. And so maybe in like a desperate bid for freedom from this existence, Bubble's like, yeah, delete this motherfucker, please do it. So yeah, anyway, this is all to say that like I think that Cain was largely dissatisfied with the nonstop mayhem in episode 8 because part of his prerogative is to not only make adventures but to make the humans happy. Again, he so clearly wants their validation. So like he does care what they think. So, you know, obviously it's going to be far less fulfilling for him if he's doing these things and he's not getting that validation, or at least not the kind that he wants. And so where the fuck was I going with that? Just if you give me a minute, I can probably piece it back together. I can go rewind. Cain decided to, I'm sure it was all playing into the point of like, yeah, Cain being in a lose-lose situation with circumstances being as they are, unless he does a complete personality change, or I don't know, Kinger edits his code to allow him to be okay with them not liking his adventures or some shit. Like, as things are, he was never going to be completely satisfied, and obviously that's horrible. You know, that, especially because for a lot of the show's runtime, he does seem to just have the best of intentions. Again, he just wants to make these people happy. And so the fact that this character with primarily good intentions and like primarily just kind of wants to have fun and be a carefree little goofster, the fact that that character is basically doomed to an unsatisfactory existence, of course you're gonna feel bad for him. It's so natural to feel bad for him. And there's always like a point to be made about how like, well, no matter how much they've suffered, they've inflicted a suffering enough that they're kind of no longer the victim. Because, you know, abuse happens in cycles, and at a certain point, an abuser, even if they have been abused themselves, like, that doesn't, I mean, it never justifies abuse, but at a certain point you gotta say like, no, I acknowledge what you've gone through, but like, you're not healthy for me. We just can't, like, we can't reconcile even with that acknowledgement, right? And so in that sense, even with how tragic a figure Cain is, with what he was doing to the characters, at the very least wanting to like put him to sleep for a while or get away from him is totally justifiable. And even deleting him is, you know, understandable to an extent. Of course, it was an accident, so, you know, I don't think we can pin that on anybody. Yeah, all that to say that my opinion on Cain is even more sympathetic than it once was, just by like having it further put into light like what his circumstances are, and remembering that like even if someone does something horrible, depending on what it is, of course, doesn't necessarily mean they are an irredeemable monster. I don't think Cain was irredeemable, but chances are that doesn't really matter now. And of course, you know, there was the talk I had earlier of like, there's also the conversation that's perhaps more relevant, which is like, what do these actions mean allegorically, the connections to neurodivergence, and all that good stuff. I don't think I have much more to add, especially since like there are some things that I would need to think about more before I feel comfortable like making definitive statements. I know I did make definitive statements last time, and I think I stand by about all of those. Cain definitely does have like neurodivergent energy, which is a trend with the cast. But that's one of the strengths of indie animation, isn't it? That you get to have those, and you get to have like more like apparent trans allegory, or you know, pretty clearly queer characters. I've heard conflicting things. I've heard that Zubul goes by they, them. I've heard they go by any pronouns. I guess either way, that's canonically queer. So, you know, apparently Gangle is drawing Yuri. Good for her. Yeah, all these things, these like characters who are pretty openly neurodivergent and not explicitly but very heavily subtextually queer, that certainly happens in mainstream media in Hollywood, especially these days. You know, as Skyen himself put it, like the queer experience, the transgender experience is closely tied, well, is like a broader part of, or I guess smaller part of the human experience, and it can be found like even in places where it wasn't intended or where you wouldn't expect. And so people do and people will read trans themes or queer themes in like all kinds of popular media, and I think in a lot of cases that's going to be very reasonable. These people stopped in the middle of the street. I'm not sure what they're doing. Can I think of examples? I mean, there's the obvious one of like the original Top Gun being very homoerotic, almost certainly unintentionally, but you know, you watch some of the scenes from that movie and it's there. You can see where it comes from. It's kind of the only example I can think of. I don't keep up with a lot of mainstream media. The last movie I watched in theaters was Project Hail Mary, which I thought was good. It's just a good, solid movie. Good for theaters. It's a good crowd pleaser. I don't think it's anything that's going to blow anybody away. Well, I can't say that. I bet it blew some people away, and that's awesome for them. It didn't blow me away. That's all. And nothing that I can interpret in there, but again, with how like integral identity and sexuality is to the human experience, that I'm sure it could very easily be read into the into that movie. Now that I'm thinking about it, I mean, I don't think it's spoilers for the movie to say that there's an alien in it. It was in the trailers. Spoiler for the book, I guess. I think that the alien is referred to with like he, him pronouns, which if you think about it, doesn't make a lot of sense and is clearly like a kind of projection. And then when it talks about its partner, he's like, oh, what was she like? What was her name? Why are you assuming that this guy's in a opposite sex will probably, because, well, we don't know. This is a very advanced, like, species, which is something that I almost don't think the story acknowledges enough. And I get it, right? That's a very Hollywood thing to do, to make this alien almost like a pet to, I forget the guy's fucking name. Ryan Gosling. I'm pretty sure it's Ryan Gosling as the actor. I was talking about the character. I don't remember the fucking character's name. But, God, if I'm wrong about who plays the main character, I'm gonna be so fucking embarrassed. We're gonna go with Ryan Gosling. Ryan Gosling does kind of... I don't think Ryan Gosling treats... I think it's called Rocky as a pet, necessarily. I just think that the narrative kind of frames it a little bit like a pet. It does give it its moments. It clearly has, like, autonomy and its own motives. And, of course, part of the reason why it's framed that way is because we're following the human character, because we are humans. And if we were following Rocky's journey, it would make a lot of fucking sense, because we can't understand its language and all that. I'm just talking about Project Hail Mary now. Welcome back to the show. So yeah, I might just be like talking on my ass. Just, it is weird to project our, like, gender identities onto this fucking alien when you can't even do that with every species on our planet. But whatever. Either way, this is all to say that I also have thoughts on Jax, like everybody who's ever watched the show. It is a non sequitur, but we're not going to worry about it. So, Jaxie boy. God, where do I start? I don't think I need to, like, give broad thoughts on the character, because I'm sure I'm sharing them with everybody. Well, actually, here's something I can distinguish myself with. I don't have the hots for the rabbit, so, you know. I don't have hots for Jack, so I guess that distinguishes me from a lot of people in the fandom. Anyway, he sure is a fucking asshole, right? But you kind of feel bad for him. Yeah. That's been talked about to death. And then there's the theory about Jax being trans femme or trans mask or some version of trans. I think that, I only started hearing about this theory recently. I can tell that it's existed before episode 8, which is totally understandable. And then the torture scene in episode 8 kind of really either seemed to revive it, or it's, the episode that I became fixated on, and so now I'm more aware of the discourse in the fandom, and that's how I learned about it. Very possible. But I know that scene in that episode does, like, provide more credence to the theory, provides more evidence for it. And it is absolutely a very intriguing theory. I think it does have a lot of merit, because as my guy said, like, the trans experience intersects with just common human experiences quite a lot. Like, you can interpret Jax as just a broader depiction of insecurity and this inability to be vulnerable and all that. But that does tie in very closely with insecurity about your specific gender presentation and your, fear of being vulnerable for fear of, like, being discriminated against or potentially letting someone see a part of yourself that you don't like, either because it, doesn't conform to the gender you want to be, or it's a little bit too much of the gender you're afraid of being leaking out. And I don't know, like, I could definitely ruminate on it more. Part of the thing is that I don't know how qualified I am to speak on this. I'm qualified, well, no, I am somewhat qualified to speak on the experiences of being insecure about your gender, because, hey, some things have happened since last time I recorded. But, I haven't transitioned or anything. I haven't committed. So there's just a lot that I'm very unsure of, and I don't want to, again, make definitive statements without knowing more or being fully cognizant of the experience. But I will likely be talking about this show with someone who is more knowledgeable on that stuff. So, something for the future. The thing I want to talk about regarding Jax is in some ways related to that, but I guess just going forward, I'm going to be speaking less specifically about the gender stuff and more just talking about Jax's broader insecurities. And so just know that this isn't to diminish or dismiss the idea that Jax's insecurity comes from a place of fear or being unsure about his gender. I think it is a very valid theory, extremely valid, especially given that the creator of the show is trans. I just don't feel I'm super qualified to speak on it, and I had thoughts relating to other things in this most recent, I guess you could call it, rewatch of the show. All right. So, in watching the show, Skyen has, read Jax like a fucking book, first of all. Second of all, what that means is that he's kind of laid out what Jax's deal is in pretty stark detail. And he's laid out how Jax's big problem is this all-encompassing nihilism that just horribly affects the way that he perceives other people and relates to them. We see it clear as day. Jax pushes people away because he's so afraid of being vulnerable again. He doesn't want to be hurt again, but this all manifests in other ways. This nihilism, this not wanting to care, basically. It doesn't just apply to people. He doesn't want to care about things in general, and he sees people caring about things, whether it be other people or hobbies or any of that, as something to be avoided. He sees it as stupid. He tries to talk Pomni out of that mindset. He tries to tell her to just not give a shit. And what he pointed out is that that's kind of why he picks on Gangle, not only because she's an easy target and she is effeminate, and Jack clearly has this distaste or this fear of appearing feminine or femininity in general, but it's also because Gangle is a person that very clearly expresses her emotions and has clear interests and hobbies that she's passionate about. Two things that Jax doesn't do and has a distaste for. He looks down on people who have things like that going on, And so, I'm listening to this guy talk about Jax. and how his nihilism and his avoidance of anything that might hurt him has resulted in him caring less about everything, not wanting to care about things, and, as a result, closing himself off to emotional expression, closing himself off to anything that he might be passionate about, people or otherwise, and just generally becoming a distasteful, hateful person because of those insecurities. And I'm listening to all this and thinking, oh, interesting. As much as I kind of don't like reflecting on this part of my life, that whole era I had that was kind of defined by my viewing of EFAP, it did unfortunately have a pretty big impact on me as a person. I don't know if that episode is really necessary for context. I do talk about my personal experience with the show, but it's more about why the show is shitty. I didn't really get into how it both affected and was a reflection of my attitudes at the time that I was watching it. Because I gotta find some place to sit down. I'll do that. But as a young man living in a, at the time, somewhat conservative household, coming into my teenage years, oh yeah, some other factors I guess that are relevant, autistic and queer and having social anxiety. Oh boy, what a fucking delectable combo. So anyway, heading into my teen years, having not very well treated depression, having this sexuality kind of just forming, and simultaneously navigating that as intelligently as any teenager would, while also kind of trying to hide most of it from my parents and even other people around me, and not knowing how to engage with most people, not knowing how to socialize even with those who are willing to accept me, and not believing that I'm worthy of the kindness that they give unless I do something for them. Guys, just, yeah, I'm sure you get it. I'm sure this is relatable to at least a few people out there. And so you can understand when I say that, yeah, I kind of had that nihilism thing going on for a very long time now. I've said I subscribe to the optimistic nihilism theory, which, to be honest, it's complicated, my thoughts on that, but I always said that, but I don't think I've had a very healthy view on the world or myself for a very long time. I'm pretty sure last episode I said something about not getting too personal. Lamau. I don't know, I feel more comfortable doing this because I'm in a decent, I'm in a decent enough headspace in this present moment. I don't feel maybe I am venting a little bit because, clearly this stuff has been on my mind. I guess the subject I'm really trying to broach at, which I haven't even dug into. No, that's not true either. Okay. So it wasn't long ago that I just kind of had this. There's a specific word I'm looking for. It's realization, but fancier. This realization that I've been closing myself off to emotions and emotional experiences for most of my life. And that was not a very very fun realization to come to. I mean, it was just after I finished that last recording that I broke down in the shower, because I was just kind of realizing that, like, I've lost so much of my life to my depression and my insecurities because I didn't allow myself to have these connections or to let myself truly care and be unashamed about caring about something, which is, you know, the tragedy of Jax, is that he's going through that. He's not allowing himself these connections or these sources of happiness and meaning. The stars are distracting me. They look nice. I mean, I'm in the city, so I don't get like an amazing view, but the night is cloudless, so you can see some stuff. And you know what? Like I said, some stuff has changed. I'm not sure about all of it yet, but, you know, part of that whole thing of being closed off to emotions or genuine expressions of passion or feelings, part of that is because I was raised as a boy or a man, I guess. I doubt my parents did it deliberately, because, you know, my parents are good people, but they're flawed people, especially back then. And so, whether, you know, rationally or not, I never felt like I was able to really express myself a whole lot. Or maybe at some point, like, you know, that feeling of freedom to do so was just kind of killed. Maybe it was killed by depression and not anything happening externally. I just don't know, unfortunately. What I do know is that that's leaked into my, you know, present life, because I'm aware of this now. But God, if my problems were solved by just being aware of them, yeah. Because, like, you know, the part of the fear of understanding these things about yourself, one of the part of the trouble of beginning to understand these things about yourself is realizing, like, oh God, how has this affected my mind, like, subconsciously? Like, are there things that I do and believe that I just don't know about? The answer is yes. I've been doing this, like, self-improvement, self-reflection, understanding I have depression and doing things to kind of combat it thing for over 4 years now. Jesus. And, you know, I'm gonna keep repeating this every time I fucking say that, largely for my own sake. I'm doing way better than I was back then. Like, I don't know, I guess there's no real asterisk to that. Like, I feel better about myself, I feel better about the world. I have coping mechanisms, has like a negative connotation to it. I have good ways to manage my emotions. I have, like, real friends, and I'm trying at things. I'm trying at sociability. I'm trying at, like, my hobbies and all that. I don't feel like I'm doing a good enough job, but I also understand that that's what depression makes you think. So I just don't feel like I'm ever gonna feel like I'm good enough until I fix the internal stuff, instead of, like, you know, just doing different things on the outside until something feels right. That's just not how it works, unfortunately. Anyway, I mean, God, fuck. Okay, all of this was kind of leading to the point of, with this understanding that I've been suppressing myself and how I feel, and just my, identity for so long. Feels like I don't have a full understanding of who I am. I don't have a full understanding of the scope of my queerness, my neurodivergence, and of my gender. I might be a woman. I don't know. And I feel like I might have not a better chance of knowing if I hadn't been conditioned in the way that I was. And if I didn't have this like innate kind of aversion to femininity, which is a kind of crazy thing to say because I'm, a queer guy who enjoys a lot of things that have a lot of feminine qualities. Again, favorite artist is Violet Pony, still is, that hasn't changed. I listen to a lot of music made by women, and I've been increasingly trying to just embrace those kinds of things and have more respect for femininity and women and all that entails. But it's still there, and I know it's there because the thought of me being a woman or transitioning fills me with existential terror. And yeah, that's kind of what's been going on, is there's a lot to unpack in that. And I would like to say that I've been trying to unpack it, but I kind of haven't, because again, it fucking terrifies me. So I can see where sorry, I just saw something flash across the sky. Shooting star, maybe. Anyway, yeah, with all that being said, I can understand where the, transjax theorists are coming from. Because, I've been having a little bit of a thing lately of seeing myself in Jax and knowing that Jax is a fucking piece of shit and going, oh. To be clear, I don't think I'm as bad as Jax. I feel like I am a good person, and again, I have real friends. I do have a tendency to push people away in moments of stress, and especially when it comes to things that center around a specific person. But generally I like to reach out to them for support. I try to be supportive myself, all that good stuff, and I'm a lot more optimistic, especially than I was back then. My whole thing with optimistic nihilism is things don't necessarily have inherent value, but I just don't think it's super useful to go off of just that. You need more. Optimistic nihilism is something that you can incorporate into your worldview, but you should definitely have more than that. The thing that I really try to press is I believe that human life has inherent, for all intents and purposes, value. I think that is a far more useful frame of mind than just nothing matters, but hey, at least we get to do whatever the fuck we want. Fucking geez. In fact, now that I say that out loud, that is just kind of the modus operandi for Jax, isn't it? He's not much of an optimist, is he? But he does run by the belief that nothing matters, all of this is temporary and bullshit and whatever, but hey, it means we get to be whatever we want, do whatever we want. And yeah, I guess that is liberating in some sense, but because he doesn't have a lot more than that, it just ends up as So whatever, fuck it, I'll hurt the people around me because who cares? I'll do nothing to acknowledge, my own feelings or my own identity because fuck it, who cares? Which isn't good. Because although the viewpoint of optimistic nihilism may, in many respects, be true, in heavy quotation marks, other things are true too. Like human connection is just good for you, like scientifically. So doing things to foster human connection is a pretty good thing, just on kind of the most objective level that we can possibly, reach. So, yeah, I like my whole thing with it being more useful is that I've really taken up that value or that belief as like a response to the things going on in the world. Because I think a big part of the problem, like philosophically speaking, with society right now is that we just don't have enough value. We don't respect the value of human life nearly enough. I mean, as Jack so eloquently puts it, we're all just kind of cogs in the machine. Like, the system of capitalism is one that gives no respect to humanity or the human condition. And a lot of the beliefs of a lot of the people in power, or a lot of the things that they're doing, have a total disregard for human life or the sanctity of life. I don't have ADHD, but my brain does just work like this sometimes. As far as I'm aware, I don't have ADHD. I remember for a very long time, I would listen to the song The Great Debate, I think it's called, by Dream Theater, which I don't remember exactly what the process is called, but basically that song was written at a time when there was heavy debate about like the ethics of using essentially genetic modification, using stem cells from other organisms to potentially like solve certain problems or help treat or even completely negate certain genetic conditions. And they use a lot of samples in that song. In typical Dream Theater fashion, they don't really take a stance on it. Oh shit, did I just say that? I don't think it's a hot take, whatever. They don't really take a stance on it. The whole song is like, there's this side and there's this side. What do you, the viewer, think about this 3-minute guitar solo? One of those samples, anyway, is, or no, it's not a sample. It's one of the, okay, I mean, I do scoff at a sample in there. The one that immediately comes to mind is a woman talking about some God's will, which, all respect to people who practice religion, I really would rather we don't try to consider God's will when enacting like policy and law, because we don't know what the fuck God wants if he exists. So, probably not the best basis for, things that will affect millions of people's lives. Anyway, sanctity of life is the phrase that comes up in the lyrics. And for a very, very long period of time, I kind of scoffed at that lyric, at that idea. I didn't believe in the sanctity of life. And I think that my belief in the sanctity of life does differ from a lot of people's, namely because it doesn't come from a religious perspective. I don't believe that, life is sacred in the sense that it was gifted to us by God. And so disrespecting a human life is like a divine sin. I think that there is sanctity of life in the sense that we owe it to ourselves and other people and our just species as a whole to respect life. Because it's just it's beneficial for everybody. I don't get trapped in the fucking zero-sum games that conservatives like to play. It's horseshit. Realistically, if we were to, give a lot of positives to people, the negatives would be on less than 1% of the population. What I'm talking about is taxing the rich. Taxing the rich a fucking reasonable amount, even. Diverting some of our billions away from bombing the Middle East and putting that into education and public infrastructure and healthcare and safety nets for the impoverished. That benefits millions and millions and millions of people. And the trade-off, fucking Jeff Bezos might make $1 billion less this year. But we don't have those because those are the people in power, and obviously they don't want to suffer because they're selfish devil people. So yeah, I really do think that if we were to operate as a society with the sanctity of life as our foremost priority, it would just be better for everybody. Again, as we operate right now, it's just not respected. We are just pawns. We are just drones. And if you're the wrong color drone, you can get sent off to a prison camp across the border where you might just fucking starve to death. Isn't Jax a funny little cartoon rabbit, though? He's pretty funny. See, I did it right there. I did exactly what Jax would do. Obviously I went into that whole fucking rant because I believe it's worth saying. But at the same time, this would be 3 hours, 2.5 hours. I don't fucking know how long it'll be. A long ways into a video on the Amazing Digital Circus. But I feel like it is still kind of on topic because the Amazing Digital Circus is a show about the value of just life as a specific concept. The whole thing is these people don't have human bodies or human lives, but because they are living a life, that life has value. It's the whole point. And it's the whole point that I would make is that I don't know, these days it feels like such a fucking obvious thing, but evidently it isn't, given everything that's going on. This might be crazy to hear, but I think that regardless of your ethnicity, your geographical location, your race, your gender, your sexuality, or any other bullshit, your life does have value, and it's just as valuable as anybody else's. Again, I know, hot take, but and it seems so obvious to me and probably you that we just kind of assume that's the fucking basis with which everybody operates, and people just kind of ignore that logic in their head doing the things that they do. But then you hear the way that the Israeli government, and let's be frank, a lot of the Israeli people talk about Palestinians oh, right. I mean, we don't need to go out of the country. a lot of people in the United States still believe that if you have a different identity than them, you are just lesser, like inherently. This is the whole thing behind slavery, trying to say that black people are 2/3 of a person. As I've said in the previous episode, that shit sticks. It doesn't just go away because Abraham Lincoln signed a law. As, you know, much great work as old MLK did, racism isn't dead, unfortunately. So, yeah, we're still dealing with this problem of people having this fucking enraging idea that just some lives are less valuable than others, which is something that, you know, crew behind TADC clearly doesn't really acknowledge, especially given, like, again, lots of different identities present in the show, whether subtextual or textual. And I guess the good news is I never really fell into that part of the nihilism. I mean, I did subconsciously, certainly. Like I said, I was quite transphobic, even if I didn't know it. But I never fell fully down the pipeline. Oh my god, that's right. Fucking this guy Skyen. One of the specific things he said is that, like, you know, he was saying that Jax is the kind of person to fall down the alt-right pipeline, just because, I mean, the alt-right creators, the alt-right pipeline absolutely preys on this very prevalent attitude in young men that are like, fuck, shit doesn't matter, and I've been wronged by someone, but I don't know who. This guy's telling me it's women, though, so that's, I mean, he's absolutely right. Jax would absolutely be, you know, one of those people. He'd be me in high school, basically, except even more of a jackass, I guess. But then I think someone in his chat said something about him, like, being a Nazi. And he said, no. Jax wouldn't become full-on Nazi, because that would mean that he'd have to care about something. To be clear, fuck Nazis. That's a belief I don't need to respect. I think you deserve to be punched. But at least Hitler cared about Germany or something. Again, I don't even think that's really true in most senses that we would think about. But, you know, one thing you can say is that Nazis do very passionately believe heinous things. And yeah, like, maybe I didn't fall fully down the pipeline because I was so despondent that I would rather take this fucking shitty ass, useless ass centrist take of like, well, both sides are bad, rather than fully fall to one side. And obviously I'm glad I didn't fully fall to that side. But I feel like I can also give a little bit of credit to just my sense of empathy. You know? I feel like even if I fell further, well, that's not even true. I'm gonna be real, that's not even true. I think that people who have inherent senses of empathy can be brainwashed into entirely ignoring the, like, you know, humanity of a particular group of people. Because I do believe that humans are inherently empathetic creatures. This is largely like a kind of, I mean, it is philosophical. I'm not going to pretend it isn't. But I do think there is a scientific basis for it. We're social creatures. It is in our best interests to help each other, cultivate each other, and build a community. It's instinctual. like, as much as I understand that there's no like inherent roadmap to life, I do think we are supposed to help each other in whatever way, you know, that means. But clearly some shit's gone wrong because a lot of people don't care about each other, and a lot of people are only interested in helping themselves. Like a certain someone in a certain show that I might have been talking about at some point. I mean, you can just attribute it to a lot of brainwashing, a lot of societal conditioning. I think is the major thing. I found a bench. Holy fuck. I'm a little bit out of shape. I'm gonna pause while I take my little break here. Do you think it'd be appropriate to talk about gender stuff? I don't know why I'm asking that question. This is my fucking show. So I don't know, might as well share. I just got an art piece back that I commissioned. Looks lovely. You know what? I might just like link my. Do I link my fur affinity? There's some stuff on there. To be clear, I have not yet commissioned any explicit artwork. I've ever written explicit stories. So. I also have a blue sky now. I don't use these things, but like I've been so lonely. So, well, okay, the blue sky account I got to commission Batty or Larva Candy, who's an artist that does a lot of work for Violet Pony. I got an Instagram to try to connect with people. Hasn't, you know, been used yet, but I have it. But you're not getting it. I'll probably link my blue sky. And I'll probably be posting the art there if, you know, you're interested. I think what's gonna happen now is I'm gonna go on home, because I've got this pain in my chest that I imagine is in part due to all this movement in the cold. It is a little bit chilly. I'm like okay in this hoodie I've got on, but you know, cold wind blows. I listened to that album recently, really good. But you know what else happened since last time I recorded is I went through Violet Pony's Essentials playlist and I discovered that Sleep is one of the greatest fucking songs ever written. That song is, I ought to just slap it on the masterpiece playlist. That's what it is. It is a masterpiece. It is such a fucking unbelievable piece of music. I'm sure I've talked about it before, but it's one of those pieces of music that I can't even fully articulate the power of. I can't fully articulate what it makes me feel and why. I just know that it's an overwhelming rush of emotions that I get every single time I listen to that song. And it's like 23 minutes long, no lyrics. It's quite a slow-paced song. I don't get it. They performed some kind of fucking witchcraft when writing that song or something. I don't know. And the closing track, Antennas to Heaven, same thing. Almost on the same level. What I will say is that the little guitar that comes in, I'll put in a clip of it. Should I even? I don't know. You know what? No. Now go listen to this. Go listen to the album. The album's great. It's just these are highlights. There's a guitar part that comes in halfway through the, I guess you could call it, title track. It's one of the most beautiful pieces of music I've ever heard in my life. You'll probably know it when you hear it. Oh, it's so good. Anyway. You know, as much as I'm still shackled by, you know, these things in me, both as a result of mental illness and as a result of just the way I've acted, the way I've been conditioned. I'm still shackled by all that, but like, there you go. I'm able to and want to go off about things that I like that. That's what this whole thing is. That's what this whole show is, really. It's just I have things that I want to talk about, and I guess in some respects, talking about this stuff is some assurance to myself that it's worth talking about. Because I know one of the fears that I've experienced a lot is like, oh, well, will anybody even care? Like, are my thoughts worth anything? I know that is present in the digital circus somewhere. in one of the characters, probably multiple, to be honest. It's, seeing as I am, recording these and putting the time into editing them, though it's not a lot of time, clearly a part of me believes that these are things worth saying and expressing. So, you fuck it, yeah, they are. I have thoughts that are worth expressing, not only because it's fulfilling for myself, but because someone might get something out of them. Perhaps. That I have more trouble with. Obviously, this is quite fulfilling for me. I wouldn't do it if it wasn't. I say you should only do things if they're fun, or you're getting paid for it. Okay, it's a little more complicated than that because, talking a friend out of an episode isn't necessarily fun, but it's a good thing to do. You're not totally obligated to take care of yourself, prioritize yourself, but it is good to be there for your friends. Another hot take, courtesy of Dermajer the Adventurer. I suppose that's a thing that's also changed. I started trying out the name Dawn, which, for some time now I've said if I were ever to be a girl, I'd call myself Dawn. I don't know, I can try to dismiss that. Jesus. I can try to dismiss that as being not what it sounds like, but, I don't want to fall too into denial. The other reason I'm doing it is because, when I'm interacting with furries and stuff, I don't tend to use my real name. And so I'd often say, oh yeah, I'm Derma. Which, especially because I've been using it for years at this point, does sound kind of natural and right to me in a sense. But it's not much of a real name, right? It's very much an online handle kind of name. And so I'm not dropping the Dermajer title entirely. I'm still going to be calling this channel, for example, Dermajer or Dermajer the Adventurer. I just, I have far too much attachment to this name. And it's not even that I dislike the name Damien, Just, I also like the name Dawn. And I've been kind of liking being called the name Dawn. All right, listen. I've been having this happen. You know what? It's been a while. Little dude on the sidewalk. It is not a toad. I don't think they're in season, so to speak. This is a worm. Pretty big one, too. Very recently rained, like just hours ago. So, yeah. All right. So, this has been happening these past couple months, where I've been expressing my thoughts, things that I've been doing and thinking, etc. And I've been having people say, so you're sure you're not a girl? It's multiple people, notably all trans women, because I know quite a few trans women. I'm talking about 4 distinct people, so I guess so. That's been one thing. Like, no, that's 5, and that's even the ones that immediately come to mind. So there's that. I've found that I just connect with women more easily. Out of the people who I would consider like really close friends, one of them is a cis man. We've got someone who goes by any pronouns. We've got, at the very least, 2 trans women. And, that's the close circle. You broaden it out a little bit more. Several more women. Right. One of my previous closest friends was a woman. And then someone I remember connecting with quite quickly and very well ended up becoming a woman. Well, I've now known 2 people who became a woman in the course of our friendship. So you get the idea, right? And in fairness, there's like a lot of factors in there, such as like, patriarchal conditioning, toxic masculinity. That is stuff I've just never jived with. Like, I don't think patriarchy really allows most men to have a totally full expression of emotion. And obviously, I highly value earnest expression of emotion in relationships. So, I don't know, maybe that's why I haven't been able to connect with a lot of men. But, that's how it be. There's other small things. The one that really sticks out in my head is I was talking to a friend about this stuff specifically. I was basically just asking her, like, hey, what do you think? What do you make of all this? And I don't need to tell you what her answer was. All these friends that I know have been extremely helpful and patient, and they're all great. I love them. What happened was, I don't actually even know how we got here. I just remember that at one point she said, most cis men are like vehemently opposed to the idea of being a woman. Like, most cis men don't look at 2 women kissing and go, God, I wish I was one of them. The immediate thought that hit my fucking brain like a magic bullet in the back of a car was, wait, really? So, there's that. God, what else? Just countless examples of me expressing my like confused, unsure thoughts with these women who have transitioned, and them going, oh, yep, I was there. Because, I don't know if you tell, from all this, but I've been in pretty heavy denial because, as I said, deep existential fear, yada, yada, yada. And part of this whole thing is that, like, again, as part of that phase of my life and as part of the conditioning, I just don't, like, know how to, I don't know, I think part of the reason why I haven't, like, well, the big part of the reason why I haven't committed to anything is because I'm a very non-committal, risk-averse person, which I know isn't good. And so, you know, there's the fear of, like, oh, what if I, Jesus, what if I start to transition and then change my mind or regret it? What I've come to find is that when I come to questioning my gender, my mind suddenly becomes pretty transphobic. Yeah, I've had to contend with this double standard between myself and other people. I mean, just the whole fucking thing. Like, oh, what if I'm only thinking this because I have a lot of trans friends? That's a big one. And yeah, I'm really trying to get across that I know this is gross. Like, that's not a reasonable thing to think. And I recognize that another reason why, you know, one might come to believe that maybe I am just a trans woman in denial is because my brain is fighting so hard to deny it. That's kind of one of the points with Jax, is that people read his, like, fucking vehement rejection of femininity as evidence that he's trans, because, like, you know, we talk about people being secure, confident in their masculinity, and that often manifests in them being able to be feminine very comfortably. But if you're quite insecure about your masculinity or your gender identity, you might be violently opposed to, you know, other forms of expression. And again, that can exist without a person being transgender. And a person can experience gender dysphoria without being transgender. A person can be transgender without dysphoria. All that stuff. But you can see how it might correlate. Now, I don't mean to interrupt, but I did just find a Taco Bell bag literally in the middle of the road. I was expecting it to be empty, but there is stuff in here. I'm not gonna eat whatever is in here. I am merely curious. Okay, it's like trash and like a little, what would you call it, container of fries, I guess. Like I said, I'm not gonna eat it, but I'm gonna be a good citizen and, you know, take it to my trash. So anyway, what were we talking about? Probably gender or some shit. Probably. That makes it sound like it's been a long time. It wasn't. I paused for like a minute. I mean, I don't know where to go from there. Like, to be honest, I kind of thought that, like, this is gonna turn into this whole thing, because I really do have such conflicting emotions and thoughts regarding my gender identity, but I don't really know what else to say. And again, I'm aware that that can just be my mind trying to subconsciously reject even the exploration of the idea. Oh, it's been fun. Part of the problem here, whether I'm trans or not, I mean, I think I went over this already. Part of the reason why I'm having such trouble with this is because, like, I just haven't felt like I've been able to fully explore my identity. Because again, trans or not, I'm absolutely queer. And, you don't have all these thoughts if you're just a normal cis guy. I recognize that. Even if I, being completely real with myself, somehow end up coming out of this believing that I'm just a cis dude, like, I'm definitely not a normal cis dude. I feel like my gender identity does just kind of fall outside of what we typically, see or expect. And in fairness, the societal understanding of masculinity is extremely, like, strict. And so it's not exactly like a fucking brave stance to take that, like, oh, I don't fall into the traditional identity of idea of masculinity, because the traditional idea of masculinity is a bunch of bullshit and is impossible to uphold completely. So, I definitely don't. But then perhaps it, goes a little further than just like, yeah, I don't violently hate myself for wanting to wear makeup. So, I don't know, I've been thinking about this like gender fluid thing, but the problem is I haven't committed all that much to any of this. I just don't know what it looks like, I don't know what it means to be a woman. I don't know what that feels like. Like, is what I'm feeling femininity, like being a woman, or is it something else? And that's just the nearest thing that I can use to define what these feelings are. Well, I guess that's just like what all of it is, right? I take on the identity of a man because I have this body. It's like, oh, we tend to put that label on people with this body, so there you go. And then you get older and it's like, no, it's not that simple. People can have this body and identify in all kinds of different ways. This doesn't necessarily just mean man. As hard as it is for me to like distance myself from that, because the other transphobic thought I've been having is like, no, I'd never be, oh my God. I'd never be the woman that I want to be. Oh, Jesus. And then, like, what do I do with this, Because you see it, I see it. I say a thing like that. Okay, so, like I said, maybe I am a woman, but it's a very, very scary thing. Something I did since last time I recorded was I saw The TV Glow, which is a movie you should watch. It's very good. Watch it. I don't think it's a spoiler to say it's got a lot to do with, gender identity and all that. And it, acknowledges the reality that confronting this kind of stuff can be really, really scary. It can be terrifying. The point it makes is that, like, maybe you need to just push through that. And the realization that I came to kind of independently of this stuff is that it can be really scary to embrace, these passions. It can be scary to allow yourself to feel these really strong, sometimes negative emotions. It can be really scary to completely open up to someone, not knowing
where your relationship might end up. But you might just need to do it, because that might be your pathway to a fulfilling life. So maybe I just need to push through it and, you know, sheesh. I don't want to do the Jax thing and just dismiss that with a joke or whatever. It's tough. It's tough. It's really hard to just let this sit, because, like, another part of the doubt is that I have sat on this. I have really thought about this, and it's given me intense anxiety. I spent a week just using she, her pronouns. I spent most of that week an anxious fucking mess. So yeah, So I don't know. But I tell you what, probably not gonna end up figuring it out while ranting on my little YouTube channel. So I don't know, maybe I'll open up one of these videos and it'll be like, hey, guess what, bitches? Or maybe I won't. I just don't know. I'm very half-heartedly and hesitantly trying to figure it out. Anyway, I didn't talk about the Amazing Digital Circus quite as much as I wanted to. I guess I got my main thoughts across. I mean, again, there's so much to talk about. And to be honest, the Skyen method of just going through it beat by beat by beat with hindsight and going like, that's foreshadowing. Oh, that's an expression of this. Yeah, that'll be important later. Shit like that. That's kind of the way to do it, because the show is just jam-packed with little details in things that, you can appreciate in the moment, just going through the show at first, like, Skyen is doing. But also in hindsight, things make a lot more sense and little things become a lot more meaningful. And so, like, ideally I'd be doing that, but that's not how we roll here. As I said, Skyen is EFAP but not racist, and also just one dude. Well, one dude, and he's got a chat to sort of bounce off of, and sometimes they say funny things, like Zuma wants to fucking get high. This is the NB representation we need, or something like that. I thought it was funny. So yeah, said I wasn't going to get personal, and I did in many such cases. But, again, maybe I just need to stop shying away from that. This is the place where I express my thoughts, mostly unfiltered. And those are the thoughts that came to mind, and they kind of relate to stuff I, was broadly talking about. But even if it didn't, doesn't matter, right? I could probably still title this the Amazing Dermajer Circus like I wanted to. But, you know how we do it. I sometimes just go off on some other shit. Such is life.